on. Am I good?
You are good. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today. As I've said time and time again throughout this campaign, every day is getting harder for working Rhode Islanders. Families are struggling as inflation continues to soar and electric and gas bills are through the roof. As you all know, the Public Utilities Commission recently approved a 47% electricity rate hike. This will crush seniors on a fixed income, low-income families, small businesses, and all Rhode Islanders as we move into the colder months. This significant rate hike came as a surprise to most. When Rhode Island Energy took over, they promised two things: that jobs would be protected and that rates would not go up. They did not hold up their end of the bargain, and it's unacceptable that Dan McKee has allowed Rhode Island Energy's dishonesty to go unchallenged. But Dan McKee has the chance to do the right thing. He could unilaterally roll back this crippling rate hike and suspend the collection of the 4.2% gross receipts tax. My campaign has provided the governor with a legal justification to take such action, but he has chosen to ignore it. He has chosen to let people suffer rather than heed my advice simply because we're political rivals. In a Kalus administration, I won't care who the good idea comes from. If it helps the people of Rhode Island, I'll do everything in my power to get things done. Further, he claims the legal basis of my solution is not sound, but it is. Here with me today is former Rhode Island Supreme Court Justice Bob Flanders, one of the most respected legal minds in the state. In just a moment, he will explain to you and the people of Rhode Island why my plan works and can provide immediate relief to working families. It is my hope that following Justice Flanders' analysis, Governor McKee will swallow his pride, acknowledge that my plan is rooted in the letter of the law, and take immediate action to help those struggling. With that, I'd like to introduce Justice Bob Flanders. Justice Flanders is a former Associate Justice with the Rhode Island Supreme Court, where he served for 8 years and authored over 400 opinions. With that, I'll turn it over to Justice Flanders.
Thank you, Ashley. Good morning, everyone. The Kalus campaign asked me to take a look at something called the Rhode Island Energy Crisis Management Act, which was enacted back in 1980. And what that act provides for, this is a state legislation, whenever there's any abnormal energy-related market disruption that threatens the welfare of Rhode Island citizens, the governor can issue an executive order declaring the existence of an energy crisis. That's defined as a condition of danger to the welfare or economic well-being of Rhode Island citizens due to existing or impending abnormal market disruptions as they relate to energy resources. The Russo-Ukrainian conflict and war has caused large increases in market prices for gas and electricity. The heavy dependence of Europe and others on Russian gas, the European sanctions of Russian products, has resulted in abnormal market conditions. This was confirmed recently in testimony before the Public Utilities Commission, where executives of the utility testified to the fact that this is just not normal, and therefore this is their explanation for the rate increases that Ms. Kalus just alluded to. The governor, under this legislation, is empowered to declare an energy crisis and establish and implement programs and plans to control and regulate all energy and energy resources, and to make, amend, and rescind any orders, rules, and regulations that bear on that energy situation. Thus, the governor can amend and rescind a PUC order that increased energy prices by 47% because of this energy situation that exists. And the order actually could defer the increase in abnormal rise in electric rates and gas rates to a later date when prices moderate or decrease, which they're expected to do in the not-too-distant future. The governor can also suspend any regulatory statute prescribing the procedures for the conduct of state business. And so, in my opinion, the governor could suspend the collection of the 4.2% gross receipts tax on electric and gas utility bills. As we all know, in recent years, two Rhode Island governors at a minimum have suspended a variety of statutes and regulations by using their emergency powers to do so during the pandemic. Governors use their emergency powers to deal with the calculation of unemployment taxes, the rates for child care providers, the eligibility to receive government services, and even changing the date for elections and the procedures for absentee or early voting. So there's precedent, not in this particular statute, but for the use of emergency orders, particularly on a temporary basis. So for those reasons, I think the Kalus campaign position on this issue is a sound one legally, and the governor, were he of a mind to do so, could invoke these powers to moderate these very steep increases that the rest of us here in Rhode Island are facing due to the disruption in energy availability because of the Russo-Ukrainian war, and also because of what's happening with OPEC, just cutting back on its energy production. So for those reasons, I think their position is a sound one from a legal standpoint. And if Ms. Kalus was governor, I'm confident that she would implement those actions that the law allows.
Judge, you don't buy the McKee administration's reasoning that emergency powers would only control because of supply disruption.
Well, there are supply disruptions, but I would say that the law is not limited to supply disruptions. It's any disruption in market conditions, supply being one of them. But if that was the limitation, certainly there are limitations on supply. People, because of the war in Ukraine and otherwise because of OPEC's action.
Do you know of any case where this has been tested, whether that law could be applied to prices?
I don't, because I'm not sure that has been implemented. Obviously, I alluded to other types of emergency powers, but this was enacted back when we had an energy crisis in the late 70s and early 80s, when we might all, those of us who are old enough to remember, had to wait in lines to get gasoline and so forth. So I don't know that they ever invoked it, because perhaps by the time it was enacted, conditions had moderated by then. But so the answer to your question is no. I'm not aware of any. But it's there on the books. It's never been repealed. It's never been amended. And it's there to be acted on in an emergency.
Question
Judge?
for the candidate. You mentioned at some point, and I missed one word in there, somebody promised their rates would not go up. Were you talking about Governor McKee or Rhode Island Energy?
So when an energy company comes in to purchase another one, there is a promise. There are two things that are asked, especially in a natural monopoly, which is what the energy market is. And usually you make reassurances about jobs and prices. So to have a new company come in and then immediately raise prices is something that is not acceptable. And what is less acceptable is a governor who has the ability to help working people and that does nothing. Just because an idea comes from your political opponent doesn't mean that you should not take it if it helps the people of Rhode Island. What you will get with me is a governor who will take all ideas, especially good ideas that will help in a crisis. We deserve better than Governor McKee coming up with a tangential excuse, which we have an answer to, for not doing this.
Are you under the, maybe I just misheard you because of the noise around us, but that somebody made a promise not to raise, that Rhode Island Energy, when it came in, actually in writing, someone made a promise not to raise rates, and if you have that
what I would say is that the rise in energy prices, the steep increase is something that requires immediate action. And what you are saying, that one thing does not follow the action that I'm suggesting. The thing that requires action is the fact that there is a rate increase that is jeopardizing the health and welfare of Rhode Islanders. That is something that requires action. It's cold here right now, and the governor is refusing to take action when he knows that people are going to be choosing between heating and eating. And the mitigations that he's suggested are not targeted, and they're delayed. He is saying that he is going to wait until January, and the decisions that are going to be made in January are quite frankly too late when energy prices are going up and endangering the welfare of the people of Rhode Island right now. And we have given him a path to take that will help all of Rhode Island, and he is being dismissive, which is unacceptable for a leader.
Ms. Kalus, today the governor is going to have an event with a number of mayors from around the state supporting him. What do you make of that?
I think his focus shouldn't be a party, but instead should be taking action for an energy crisis. So I am interested in policies that will help the people of Rhode Island, not parties with mayors that I've known for 20 years.
Well, all of these mayors are, not all of these mayors are Democrats, and it's not all totally partisan, right? I mean, he has a lot of support among leaders in these cities and towns.
Among career politicians. So what I would say is that the focus should be on solving problems in Rhode Island. We have a crisis in education. We have a crisis in energy prices, and we have a crisis in affordability. So while I'm happy he's having a get-together, I would prefer that there's action. Maybe he should spend the time working on the busing crisis instead.
Governor McKee professes to be the governor of all 39 cities and towns. Mm-hmm. Will you be the governor of all 39 cities and towns?
I think I've already shown that. I will be the governor for all people, not just insiders and lobbyists and career politicians. My focus is the people of Rhode Island. The way that I run my campaign is that way as well. I'm not beholden to anyone. He's beholden to everyone. And whenever he can't make a decision without calling a special interest, he folds like a chair to special interests. We deserve better than that.
Judge Flanders, quick question. A two-parter. You've returned to private practice over the last 10 plus years. So could you elaborate for Rhode Islanders who may be newer to the state, your CV, your background? And also this is a governor who's never shied away from emergency orders or intervention in a variety of, every aspect of our lives since he was, if you will, placed into office. Why do you feel he's distinguishing now? But we'd love to hear about your resume for those of us who do know it.
So I'm a graduate of Brown University and Phi Beta Kappa and Harvard Law School. I was in private practice for 10 years before being named to the bench by Governor Almond back in 1996. I served for 8.5 years on the Rhode Island Supreme Court. After stepping down from the bench and going back to private practice, I was asked to become the state-appointed receiver for Central Falls and led it through a receivership and first ever bankruptcy filing to restore it to fiscal health, and left it with a 5-year plan of recovery, which the mayor had to follow in order to comply with the bankruptcy rules. I've also been the chair of the Regents, the state board that at the time that was the head of elementary and secondary education here in Rhode Island. I chaired that board for 4 years. So I've been a town councilman in my then hometown for 4 years. So I've had a long history of public service. I was also a special prosecutor for a judge who was charged with violating his oath of office. So I've had a lot of different public service assignments, and proud of that record here in Rhode Island, as well as being in private practice as a business litigator principally. And your other question had to do with why is Governor McKee not stepping up to the plate on this?
Right. In a sense, he's literally, through his laundry list of executive orders, has literally intervened and interrupted virtually every aspect of Rhode Islander's life from the onset of his, well, he wasn't elected, he was placed into office. Why do you think there's a reticence now? They seem to be saying, and maybe you can comment on this as well, that this was passed a long time ago, so it doesn't count anymore. That's not quite how it works, is it?
No, not at all. Well, reluctantly, I'm led to the conclusion that Ms. Kalus has suggested, which is, unfortunately, this suggestion didn't come from his own campaign. It wasn't discovered by one of his staffers. It was one that the Kalus campaign came up with, and I think that when she went public with this and suggested it, he apparently poo-pooed the whole idea and is reluctant to implement it, even though legally it's on a sound basis.
Thank you.
And then, Judge, one more question for you. You brought up how this was brought up from another campaign, and the governor last week in a statement said that, if this were enacted, there would be, economic backlash on citizens, on the state. Can you, with your legal background and expertise, fully 100% assert that, if this were enacted, there would be no legal backlash whatsoever?
Of course not. I mean, you can't do anything these days without somebody potentially challenging you. So no one could give you a guarantee that somebody wouldn't challenge it. All I'm saying is that legally, the law allows for this. So if somebody wanted to challenge it, sure, they could do so. But I don't think they'd be successful. And moreover, as I suggested, and as the Kalus campaign has suggested, there would be ways to moderate the economic impact of this on utilities and others by, in effect, smoothing out the increases over time so that they could eventually be recovered when the energy crisis abates and supplies are more plentiful.
Anybody else? I think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.